welcome to another Get Swifty episode. This time around we're going to continue building our COVID-19 tracking app. I'm going to do some improvements around the UI, and we'll even add some global stats to the top of this screen here. I'm also thinking about adding a popover for this country list, because I don't think we need the full information here, because you want to be able to open up the app and just see like the global stats and then stats for whatever country you favorited. I think that'd be the way to go. I also discovered this endpoint here, which will give us the global stats and then also some extra information on each country. So what I can do is I can add these numbers into our list here off to the side. So I think that'll be really useful. So you can see it sort of at a glance without drilling into the country itself, some information on what the numbers are at the moment. So let's get started. So here's our countries view. Let's swap out this API service and we'll create a new type for fetching the summary. I'm just going to go back into the web browser and copy and paste some of the response data, just so I've got something to work with. Okay, so we got a global. Let's call that global stats. We haven't created that yet, so let's do that. Awesome. Ideally, these properties would be camel cased, but to save us some time, I'm just going to match it up with what the API gives us. Now with global stats, I only really care about totals, so I'm not going to worry about doing the new confirmed or anything like that. And then we can add our countries. Now let's just confirm that this will match up with the other country that we've already created. And let's add the extra information here. Now since we're already doing decoding, we may as well go with camel case here. I'll even add the total recovered. I'm going to split this out into its own file, just to keep things clean. We'll need to create a new request on our API service. And we'll grab that URL. This time around, I'll make sure I set this correctly. That should be all we need. We can probably delete this. I can't see any use for this anymore, since we are now getting the countries back in the summary, but I'll hold on to it just for now. Let's rename this to summary view. Instead of country, we are now fetching summary. And in data here, we will change this to summary. Our list can now be summary.countries. Just need to make sure I fix this. And that builds fine, so let's run it. Okay, looks like it's not returning anything, so let's just figure that out. Take a look at this error. No such thing as ISO 2. Must have missed that one. Okay, so now we need to find a unique identifier, and I think that would be the slug. And look at that. Shouldn't see any difference. So let's make use of this new information that we have and we'll add it to the end of these rows. So here we have country name. Let's add another one. Total confirmed. Actually, what I'd like to do is have both values in there. Let's do that. And we'll put a spacer here so it can be right aligned. Let's run that again. Here we go. Okay, that doesn't look very good, so let's sort that out. So what can we do to make that better? First of all, let's make this monospace. Check that again. Let's see what happens if we get rid of this spacer. Okay, I think I might change the color. Okay, it looks a little bit better, but I'd still like to right align these without them being squashed. So how can we do that? So what I've done here is I've wrapped these two text fields in a H stack and put a spacer in between. And that seems to have solved the issue of these dropping down onto second lines or even getting truncated on the end there. So what I'd like to do now is go through and make these numbers just a little bit more readable. You can see down here when the numbers get very large. So for example, the USA's still got some text cut off there. So what we'll need to do is shorten these up so they're a lot more easier to read. So to save some time, I have found a integer extension that I can just drop into the app, and we'll use this to help abbreviate our numbers. So I'll create a new group for extensions and we'll drop that in there. That's it. We'll do a build and see if it all works. Fix these. Okay, now this returns a string, and instead of overriding these with a string value, because I might want to put these into a graph later, we're just going to create some new properties on this country. To run and see how that looks. That's much better. We'll scroll down and have a look at some of the larger ones. Perfect. Let's get that summary at the top of the screen here. So we have ourselves a navigation view with a VStack, and inside that VStack we have this list. So we can put our global summary at the top. So we'll create that. So we'll go back to our summary view and add that in here. Let's take a look at that. Okay, it's not too bad. I think I'd like to have a separate one too for active. Let's create a preview. And I'll make these other numbers larger. And let's set our current. And let's make these numbers a bit larger. We'll wrap these so they look a little bit nicer. Put these in a group so we can apply the same modifiers to all of them. Let's make this an orange. I think I like that. Let's see how it looks first. Okay, not too bad. Those numbers, again, are quite large. So what I might do is change the layout. So I'll put the active at the top, that'll take up the most space, and then I'll put confirmed and recovered below that. And we'll have to add these backgrounds individually. So I'll move this group. It's looking a little bit better. Let's add a background to this one. Cool. And maybe some spacing. Okay, now light mode, dark mode, light mode. It's not too bad, but I'll add some padding around these. Okay, that looks a lot better now. We've still got this large space at the top, and that's where the navigation bar sits. So I'm going to hide that. Okay, that's much better. Check it in dark mode. Okay. Okay, so what I want to do next is pull this list out and put it into a popover screen. So we'll go grab that list and add it to the country selection view. And in order for this to work, we'll need a list of countries. All right, now how do we present this new screen of ours? I'm thinking we'll go with a modal. So we'll create a state. And we'll add a button. I'll only have it showing when there's data to be loaded into that view. So we'll put it just here in the has data section. Until then, the button will be hidden. In here, we'll toggle the show country selection screen bool, and we'll need a net label for the button. I'm going with an image, and we're going to grab this from the SF symbols. Okay, there's the little flag. I don't like that. Let's pick something else. All right, I'm going to break out the app. I do like this flag circle. Maybe a plane. Let's use a flag. The circle. Flag.circle. Okay. We'll push that button off to the right. Okay, so I'm tired of rebuilding. I'm going to start making use of these previews. Okay, let's add some padding to this button. And I'll increase the size of this icon slightly. Gotta get resizable. Okay, now let's add a way for this button to present our country selection screen. We have to do that in here because we need access to this summary object. And we'll build and run. There we go. Nice modal with our list of countries. Okay, so now when we tap on one of these, instead of going to the next screen to show more information about this country, we want this screen to drop down and display information about that country right here. And then we'll save that selection so that when the user reopens the app, that'll already be set. So let's get on to that. So going back to the country selection view, we can remove this navigation link because we're no longer going to a detailed country view. In fact, the detailed country view has almost nothing in it. But we will reuse some of this code for displaying on the main screen. So let's clean this up carefully. Then we can select all, Control I to realign our code. Okay, so now let's change these to buttons. So how are we going to save this information for the user? The most natural place for storing this kind of stuff is in user defaults. So I'm going to create a new file that can hold all the keys for that, just so that they're all in one place. And that makes it much easier to avoid things like spelling mistakes, and it gives you a good idea of what information is being stored in the user defaults without you having to go through every single file in your app to figure that out. We'll make these static strings. And then in here, We'll set the value, which will be the country slug. And then after we've set it, we need to dismiss this view. Okay, so now we need to dismiss this screen once the user defaults value has been set. At the same time, we need to tell the previous screen to perform an update based on this selection. So how can we do that all in one go? Well, let's create a binding. We'll bind it to selected country and we'll pass that in here. We'll set that as the slug, which is the same value that we've set in user defaults. And we'll need to pass through that binding. So we'll create a state up here for it. We'll mark this as optional. And in selected country view, we'll make it optional as well. Now we need to detect when this value is updated and dismiss this screen. So we'll set show country selection screen to false, and that will dismiss it. And you know what? In here, we can even set that default user defaults value. Let's put all this in one place. And there's our value passed into user defaults here. And I've changed it so that this selected country property will be set through user defaults if one has already been previously selected. Otherwise, this will be nil. Now what we can do down here is unwrap it. Remove that spacer. And here we go. There's our selected country. Let's pick another one. There we go, that updates nicely. Well, that's it for this episode of Get Swifty. Next time around, I think we'll add some graphs to this view. We will continue on with adding search to the country selection screen. But yeah, that's it. Until next time.